At just 38 years old, Pastor Lovy Elias has faced it all: fame, criticism, and controversy. But this time, it's not about his ministry. It's about his marriage. After years of silence, his wife finally spoke, and what she revealed sent shockwaves through the entire church world. Was confession? Was it heartbreak? Or something far deeper? Stay tuned, because the truth she revealed changes everything. For years, quiet whispers surrounded his name. Questions about his past, his private life, and sudden shifts within his ministry. But now, those whispers have become headlines, and what she finally revealed might change everything people believed about the man behind Revelation Church. Pastor Lovy Elias, a name once spoken with both admiration and awe, rose to fame as a dynamic prophet and visionary, the driving force behind one of Los Angeles' fastest-growing ministries. His sermons drew crowds. His prophecy stirred faith, and his connections to celebrities made him one of the most talked-about figures in the Christian world. But while his public life glittered with influence and success, one part of his story remained hidden from view: his marriage. For years his wife stayed silent, standing in the shadows while the spotlight burned on him. Until now, her recent confession has sent shockwaves through the faith community. With calm conviction and undeniable emotion, she broke her silence, addressing years of rumors about betrayal, control, and ministry drama that had long circulated online. Some dismissed the stories as gossip from jealous critics. Others claimed they'd known the truth all along. But this time, the truth came straight from her, unfiltered, undeniable, and powerful enough to make both supporters and skeptics stop in their tracks. In today's video, we're diving deep into the story that's got the entire faith community talking. What exactly did Pastor Lovy Elias' wife reveal? How are people reacting? And what does this mean for his ministry moving forward? We're taking you inside the drama that's rocking the prophetic movement, separating fact from speculation, and exposing what really happens when faith, fame, and family collide. But stay with me until the end, because the final twist in this story is something no one saw coming, and it could change everything for one of America's most talked about pastors. To understand why, America's most talked about pastors. To understand why this revelation has sent shockwaves across social media, we need to go back to where it all began. Long before the fame, before the title Prophet Lovy, before Revelation Church, he was once known simply as Lovy Longamba, a Kenyan musician whose voice echoed on international stages as part of the legendary duo, the Longambas. Music was his world: bright lights, roaring crowds, and unstoppable energy. But after the heartbreaking death of his brother and the weight of fame began to crush him, everything changed. In the middle of that pain, Lovy said he began hearing something deeper, a divine calling. He described moments where God spoke to him through visions and dreams, pulling him away from the stage and into the pulpit. The microphones were replaced by prayer, and the spotlight turned into something far greater: a mission to change lives through prophecy and faith. Lovy had totally changed. Lives through prophecy and faith. Lovy had totally changed his life by the early 2000s. In his Los Angeles home, he started facilitating small Bible studies. As news went that the young African preacher had a special ability for prophecy, the number of sessions rapidly increased. He was said to have supernaturally revealed secret truths, foreseen future events, and offered divine insight. His little parties quickly grew into large services that were attended by sports, rappers, actors, and celebrities in addition to regular folks. Everyone wanted to hear from the man who could see things others couldn't. Well-known figures from the entertainment industry attended, and his ministry's popularity soared. However, fame also brings scrutiny. Questions concerning Pastor Lovy's personal life, particularly his marriage, increased in number as his influence rose. Who was the woman who had been on his side the entire time? Why did people seldom ever see or hear from her? Love's wife appeared to remain in the background, in contrast to many first ladies who are actively involved in ministry, and this quiet only stoked further interest. Some interpreted her preference to assist her husband in the background as an act of humility. Others started muttering, "Was there trouble in paradise?" Eventually, YouTube commentary channels and internet forums started assembling pieces of his life story. Analysis of old images, interviews, and social media posts frequently turned conjecture into news stories. However, Pastor Lovy maintained composure and concentration throughout. With thousands of members both in person and online, he transformed his church, Revelation Church, into one of America's most talked about ministries. However, the quantity of rumors concerning his marriage, his background, and his relationships with certain people surrounding him increased along with his platform. His wife hasn't spoken yet, though. At that point, the narrative takes a significant shift, because when she did speak, her admissions not only validated what others had been speculating about, but they also redefined it. Let's examine how the demands of ministry and celebrity may have strained their marriage to the breaking point. and why silence was no longer an option before delving into the specifics of what she disclosed. Few people fully comprehend the truth that lies behind every stirring speech, every miraculous claim, and every well-produced live stream. The burden of juggling family, faith, and celebrity was that reality for Pastor Lovy Elias. Three factors that frequently pull in diametrically opposed directions. Expectations increased in tandem with his ministry. He was viewed as more than just a preacher. They believed that he was a guy who could communicate directly with God, a prophet, and a healer. His entire speech was analyzed online. Every social media post, every forecast, and every public appearance came with a great deal of pressure. And his ministry wasn't the only thing being scrutinized as his influence grew. He was married. At first, everything appeared picture perfect. A young, talented pastor who preaches love, purpose, and divine destiny is in charge of a rapidly expanding congregation. Close sources and former members of his entourage, however, started to paint a very different picture below the surface, one of long hours, emotional detachment, and tiredness. Striking a balance between ministry and marriage is a genuine challenge for many pastors. It's simple to overlook the one relationship that should provide you with the most stability when you're always giving, performing, and bearing. When you're always giving, performing, and bearing the spiritual burdens of others. And that's exactly what started to happen, according to those close to the pair. Pastor Lovy's workload grew increasingly demanding as his name became well known on a global scale. His wife, who used to stand silently by his side, started to fade into the background as he went from back-to-back counseling sessions to high-profile meetings and international travel. People inside the ministry said she rarely attended at large events and avoided being photographed or recorded during services that was considered modest by some. Others hinted that tension was building and that she might not be accustomed to the attention that accompanied her husband's rising stardom. Critics started making connections online, citing her absence from significant church milestones. They conjectured about marital issues. There were even suggestions that the couple was living separately for a spell, though none of these stories were ever officially substantiated. But the questioning continued. To what extent was Pastor Lovy's time really his own? Was his family life suffering as a result of the pressure to be a prophetic voice to so many people? Why, therefore, did his wife say nothing at all, especially when her husband's name started to appear in internet rumors and disputes? She remained silent for years. Nothing on social media, no statements, no interviews. She seemed to want to completely remove herself from the public discourse, and that simply increased curiosity. Perhaps, though, her silence wasn't weakness in retrospect. Maybe that was a tactic, since she didn't speak out of resentment or rage. When she did communicate at all, she spoke in a cool, collected tone, as if she had been observing everything the entire time. And according to some close to her, this wasn't merely a response to hearsay. It was a statement years in the making, a revelation that would not only surprise a lot of people, but also cast doubt on the perception of Pastor Lovy's supposedly inviolable reputation. What precisely did she say, though? What did she reveal that caused both admirers and detractors to back off? Nobody anticipated Pastor Lovy Elias's wife's eventual speech. While her husband's ministry erupted into a worldwide phenomenon, she had been a mystery for years, a quiet presence in the background. She had watched him rise from being a musician in Kenya to a spiritual leader in Los Angeles, whose name carried weight among believers and celebrities alike. But until now, she had never entered the spotlight. She didn't make her confession during a sensational press conference or a widely shared live feed. A few words said in a private chat marked the beginning of it, and it quickly became viral on social media. According to some close to the pair, she had finally had enough. Silence was no longer an option because of the years of rumors, unanswered questions, and whispers that had accumulated online. Furthermore, she didn't refute the rumors when she did speak. They were accepted by her. However, this is when things took a surprising turn. The internet expected her to confess to scandal, betrayal, and wrongdoing, but she didn't. Rather, she unveiled something much more nuanced. Behind the pulpit, a confession about humanity, truth, and suffering. She acknowledged that many of the rumors that had been circulating over the years, such as the emotional distance, the changes in their relationship, and the widening gap between marriage and ministry life, were accurate. However, she maintained that it wasn't due to betrayal or hatred. Transformation was the reason. She claimed that she and her husband had evolved over time. It has been alleged that she stated, "The man I married is not the same man standing on that stage today, and I'm not the same woman I was back then as I am now." many who have witnessed love change and wane under the pressure of achievement and expectations found resonance in this tragic, yet profoundly human confession. She continued by explaining that celebrity may skew reality, particularly in the context of the church. It's simple to lose sight of reality at home when thousands of people look up to you, refer to you as a man of God, and rely on your advice. She acknowledged that their marriage started to feel less like a personal connection and more like a ministry collaboration. Instead of talking about love, laughing, or family, the topic shifted to sermons, services, and strategy. Her candor on the rumors themselves, however, was arguably the most startling aspect of her admission. "I am aware of what people have said about me and about him," she stated. She didn't accuse Pastor Lovy of anything specific, but rather the painful reality that, in the realm of public ministry, image can often matter more than intimacy. "For years, I remained silent because I believed that protecting our image was the right thing to do. However, truth doesn't need protection. It needs light." That one statement sent shockwaves through both supporters and critics. However, she didn't sound angry or bitter. In fact, her tone was one of acceptance and peace, according to those who heard her. She acknowledged that she and her husband had become emotionally distant, but she didn't show any resentment toward him. Instead, she spoke about the importance of forgiveness, healing, and openness in ministry families. Clips or statement went viral on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok overnight. She said, "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to remind people that even prophets are human. Even pastors hurt, and even the most anointed marriages can face seasons of silence." As hashtags like Lovy Elias and hashtag Pastor Lovy Wife began trending, thousands of users debated what her confession actually meant. Some saw it as an attack, arguing she was trying to damage her husband's reputation or get attention, while others saw it as an act of bravery, saying she was finally giving voice to the struggles so many first ladies face but are too scared to admit. As the story spread, however, people started to ask more profound questions such as, what does this mean for Pastor Lovy's ministry? How has he responded? And more importantly, could this moment of honesty mark the beginning of something greater rather than the end of something broken? Because, according to people close to the situation, Pastor Lovy's response was also unexpected. One thing was certain though, her confession had opened a door that could never be closed again. Following the revelation of Pastor Lovy Elias's wife's confession, the story quickly gained momentum on social media, with hashtags like hashtag Lovy Elias, hashtag Revelation Urch, and hashtag Parfait Life trending on various platforms within hours. What started out as a few private whispers became a full-fledged public storm, and the internet had one thing to say about it. Everyone had an opinion. Others who had been Pastor Lovy's longtime followers experienced this revelation in a different way. Many of his most loyal followers were devastated, while others did not accept it. To them, Pastor Lovy was more than just a preacher. He was a man of God who had changed lives and led countless people toward faith and purpose. Under his videos and posts, comments poured in. Prophet Lovy is anointed. People are always trying to tear down men of God. Every great leader faces lies and attacks when God is using them. Don't believe everything you hear. To them, it was simply unthinkable that his marriage was failing or that his wife had accepted the rumors. On YouTube and TikTok, commentators started breaking down every word of his wife's statement, proving that something beneath the polished sermons had been simmering all along. His wife is being manipulated by the media, but others weren't so quick to defend him. In one of the viral clips, a woman said, "I've been around church leaders my whole life, and when a pastor's wife finally speaks like that peacefully and without malice, that's not a woman lying, that's a woman free." They examined her tone, her word choice, and her calmness. Many said that her composure was not bitterness but liberation. Churches expect the First Lady to smile, dress well, and remain silent. Others echoed the view, pointing out the culture of silence that frequently surrounds prominent pastors and their families. One reader commented, "But no one asks how she feels or what she's carrying. Perhaps it's time for people to pay attention to the women who hold these positions." However, the distinction between critics and fans wasn't the only intriguing aspect. It was Pastor Lovy himself who was silent. He remained silent as the internet discussed and analyzed his wife's remarks. No public reaction, no denial, no comment. As if nothing had happened, his ministry updates, sermons, and inspiring quotes continued to fill his social media platforms. The flames was simply fueled by that quiet. Some interpreted his decision to choose peace over conflict as wise. Others interpreted it as evasion. a failure to accept his wife's acknowledged anguish. Another fan responded, "No, he's avoiding accountability. Silence speaks louder than words." One fan even said, "He's probably praying about how to respond." You don't rush when spiritual warfare is involved. Meanwhile, the story was picked up by Christian news websites and media outlets. Pastor Lovy Elias's wife breaks her silence. Church divided over her confession, the headline said. The common areas beneath these stories turned into battlegrounds, with some vehemently defending the couple, citing scripture, and some vehemently defending the couple, citing scripture and urging prayer instead of gossip. Rumors confirmed. Revelation, church under scrutiny after emotional admission. Wife of celebrity pastor speaks out. Truth doesn't need protection, it needs light. People started asking tough questions, such as why so many church leaders are silent about their personal struggles, why do ministries demand perfection from people who are ultimately human, and how many other perfect marriages in ministry are quietly falling apart behind the scenes. Others insist that the truth had to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it was. It became evident that this was no longer just about one marriage, but rather had evolved into a discussion about the greater issue of transparency in ministry. A few former members spoke up, claiming they had noticed changes in the church's atmosphere long before the story broke, that the energy had shifted from intimate worship to something more commercialized and celebrity-driven. Others quietly distanced themselves, saying they felt uncomfortable attending a ministry where there was so much unspoken tension. Some members of Revelation Church reportedly stood by their pastor wholeheartedly, saying they believed in his calling and refused to judge his personal life. This moment had touched a nerve far beyond one pastor's marriage, and it had triggered a cultural conversation about authenticity, accountability, and the pressures that come with spiritual fame. Whether those claims were true or not, they contributed to the increasing cloud of confusion surrounding the situation. Relationship coaches, religious influencers, and even secular commentators joined the conversation, framing it as a warning about what happens when personal life and public persona collide. While everyone else was speaking, Pastor Lovy himself was quietly getting ready to respond. Even those who did not follow Pastor Lovy started to weigh in. As the noise around him increased, with news outlets publishing articles, commentary videos garnering millions of views, and social media debates tearing through every platform, Pastor Lovy Elias did something no one expected. He remained silent for weeks. His words shocked both his supporters and his detractors because, rather than defending himself or disparaging his wife, he took a completely different approach that many didn't anticipate. His supporters saw his silence as evidence of spiritual maturity, as his regular schedule of teaching, prophecy, and traveling continued. Continued as if the internet wasn't ablaze with questions, while his official pages made no mention of the situation, no clarification posts, no emotional live streams, and no fiery sermons addressing the haters. Behind the scenes, sources close to the situation painted a different picture, with those in his inner circle describing a man torn between his faith and his family, struggling to maintain composure as the woman he once called his partner shared their most personal truths with the world. His critics saw as a well-planned move, an intentional attempt to let the news cycle fade away without feeding the flames. He wasn't angry at her. Pastor Lovy had always been a deeply introspective man, according to those close to him. While his public persona exuded confidence and authority, those close to him said he frequently wrestled privately with questions about purpose, pressure, and peace. One source said he was shocked and didn't expect her to talk, not publicly, not like that, but deep down he knew she wasn't lying. Thus, instead of reacting angrily when his wife spoke, he pondered. Days after the story was public, his sermons were softer, more intimate, and oddly introspective. The audacious prophecies and thunderous declarations had vanished, replaced by sermons about forgiveness, perseverance, and the invisible struggles of life. Sometimes God allows storms not to destroy us, but to remind us who we are when everything else is stripped away, he said to his congregation during one especially moving service. It sounded like spiritual advice to his supporters, but to others who had been following the dispute online, it seemed like a coded answer to everything that was happening in his personal life. That one remark silenced the throng. Behind closed doors, however, things were changing. According to insiders, Pastor Lovy became more reclusive, meetings became shorter, staff interactions became more private, and those who had previously been in his ministry's inner circle noticed tighter control over communication and image management. He continued preaching, traveling, communication, and image management. He continued preaching, traveling, and counseling high-profile clients over the ensuing weeks. According to a former employee of the church's communications division, even minor posts had to be reviewed before being published. It was similar to treading carefully. We sensed that there was more going on behind the scenes. The most unexpected element, though, might have been how he allegedly managed his marriage in private. Sources close to the pair disclosed that, in spite of the public backlash, Pastor Lovy contacted his wife immediately following her remarks to express gratitude rather than to reprimand her. One insider said his message was straightforward. "I pardon you. You told it like it was." I could see how that alone startled some who were aware of the potential harm that such public scrutiny may do. Few people anticipated that a guy under such extreme strain would be more interested in understanding and healing than in protecting his reputation. He reportedly even instructed his leadership team to treat his wife with respect whenever her name was mentioned in conversation and to refrain from disparaging her. This was taken as humility by some. Some viewed it as a calculated move to maintain his reputation as a man of grace and spiritual authority. His silence, however, was open to interpretation. His motivations became the subject of unending debate among online critics. Was this the peaceful power, the serenity of a man with faith, or was it a PR tactic to maintain his supporters' loyalty while he waited for the storm to pass? Controlled silence. Church attendance, meanwhile, varied. His poise served as an inspiration to certain members, citing it as evidence that a man of God lives by his spirit rather than his feelings. Others silently wandered away, uncomfortable with the questions that remained unaddressed. However, the internet commotion grew louder the longer Pastor Lovy kept mute. The titles of each new sermon were examined, each mysterious Instagram caption was seen as a hint, and fans flocked to the comments section, pleading for clarification, until he finally alluded to the fact that a season of testing was approaching. He then broke his quiet during a midweek service that was live-streamed online. His teaching, which many saw as a covert reaction to everything, was more than a direct statement. He stated, "When God calls you to serve, He doesn't promise comfort, He promises truth, and truth always exposes what was hidden. Not to shame, but to cleanse. You cannot walk in light and be afraid of exposure." That phrase, "you cannot walk in light and be afraid of exposure," instantly became an internet sensation. Social media was inundated with supporters who referred to it as a divine message. However, some viewed it as a spiritually disguised confession. Even the headline of one well-known YouTube commentator's video was, "Pastor Lovy finally acknowledges everything, but in his own